Welcome to the Beer Channel. John Starodumsky here, and today I have a beer for you, kind of a really special beer. It's almost like a beer time machine, and the beer in question is New Albion Ale, or the New Albion Ale, if you want to call it that. It's a product of the Boston Beer Company, the makers of Samuel Adams, as you probably know them better for. So this is definitely, if there's a beer with a history, this is certainly it, at least as far as American microbrewing is concerned. New Albion Ale actually started out back in 1976 when a fellow named Jack McAuliffe, who had spent some time overseas in Europe, and was exposed to some real beers over there, started to wonder why he couldn't get that same kind of beer here in the United States. And of course, the reason was in those days that your best options were macro-brewed American lagers. Since the days of Prohibition, the number of American breweries had diminished to a handful, and they were pretty much cranking out the same kind of bland, watered down, adjunct laden American lager, broadly in the Pilsner style. This was something that actually had become before Prohibition, with the rise of Anheuser-Busch in the late 1800s, with the advent of refrigerated rail cars. They were able to start to distribute beer nationally, and people got the taste for that same bland beer. But Prohibition certainly helped that process along by killing off a lot of breweries and really putting a nail in the coffin of beer diversity in America. So anyway, Jack, as I said, he came to America and wondered why that was the case. Now, he decided that he was going to do something about that, and in 1976 he founded New Albion Brewing in California, and it was really the first American microbrewery. You probably want to call it a nano brewery or a pico brewery because it was so small. Now, I've always wondered, what that beer tasted like, and I never actually thought I would ever find out what it did taste like. This is, we're talking 76. I actually was 12 years old, so beer wasn't even on my radar at the time. This is before the days of the beers of Sierra Nevada, Samuel Adams, Red Hook, any of the some of the big craft brewers of today really hadn't even gotten started yet. Anchor was around, but they certainly weren't distributed as widely as they are today, or at least they weren't as well known as they are today. So enter New Albion, and really, unfortunately, it didn't last. Jack McAuliffe started the country down a path that we in the past few decades has really we've accelerated down that path. But I think really Jack was he was certainly a huge pioneer for beer in America. People talk about Fritz Maytag at Anchor, and they talk about Ken Grossman at Sierra Nevada, and even Jim Cook at Boston Beer, who I think he definitely deserves praise for the distribution of Sam Adams, which allowed people to get a taste of good beer and at a decent price, and it really became ubiquitous. Sam Adams is just found just about everywhere, and that meant that more people tried it and got to like these kinds of beers. Well, thanks again to Jim for giving Jack the opportunity to brew this beer again, and that's why we're here today. So with New Albion, Boston Beer gives the proceeds to Jack, and Jack used the original recipe that he used back in '76. So we certainly have a taste of what that beer was like back in those days. I think it's an American blonde lager with a decent amount of hops. So let's give it I'm going to crack it open and give some thoughts on it, and then we'll talk about some of the reaction to it. So I've got sort of an old school Sam Adams footed Pilsner glass, and maybe some point new Albion glasses will hit the market. From what I understand, it's a one-time brew, but certainly would love to see that that change in this beer be rolled out annually. Another interesting idea too. I wonder that Jack might have had some other recipes he was playing around with, that he thought about rolling out, and maybe we could get some new Albion beers. He did do a collaboration effort with Ken Grossman of Sierra Nevada, so he's been back on the brewing scene for a few years now. But anyway, what you see is new Albion Ale, and try and give you a close up there. So you've got a bright golden colored, very carbonated ale. Very nice head. Certainly a hoppy nose there. It's flowery. Get those Cascade hops. There's a gentle biscuity malt palate to this beer that I really, really like. Part of it's because the beer is so fresh. I think I bought this maybe a month ago. But it is very, very fresh tasting, crisp, clean. Well, not really clean. There's a few fruity esters to it, but it is what I probably meant to say was clean of adjuncts, which in the day would have been, that would have been quite the accomplishment here. Because this beer has flavor, and beers of the day, they really didn't. That was the origin of this beer. When I think back to those years, I think of my dad and the beers that he drank, and almost invariably he would bring home Narragansett, which was a decent local lager, a regional brewer, better than Budweiser and Miller and those types of beers, I think. He would bring home Schmitz of Philadelphia, but that has to make you stop and think about the fact that I can remember the beers that my dad used to drink, which means there weren't a lot of them around. I mean, those were the mainstays that he drank. If my kids today were to think back from their younger days, or hence maybe 10 years down the line, about the beers that I bring home, I guarantee you they're never going to remember them all, because there's so many, and that speaks to the diversity that we have today. And that's the road that Jack started us down. Yeah, really. Very, very refreshing, drinkable, but it has flavor. There's a good flavor to it, crisp, that light fruit, and then the Cascade hops in the finish, just a little flowery, and that distinct Cascade flavor. It's a very, very good beer. I bought a 6-pack, and I'm going back for more because it's so good at about $9 a 6-pack. Now, here's the downside for today's beer geeks. So there's been a lot of debate that I've seen about this beer, and so a number of today's beer geeks don't like it because it's on the lighter side, at least in comparison to the beers that are produced today. So I disagree with that. I think every beer has its place. A light-bodied beer like this it actually would be perfectly suited for warmer weather drinking, but I think it also goes very well with food. I don't want an imperial stout when I'm out dining. That's going to overwhelm what I'm eating. Maybe with dessert it'll be okay, but in most cases a beer like this is perfect because it's got flavor to cut through. It's got the hoppiness, the dry hoppiness to it to make it refreshing, and it's a good beer to go with food. This is also a good beer that I might want to sit and have a couple of. I can't sit and drink 10 barley wines in a row, or maybe I could, but I'll pay for it the next day. And so I think today's beer drinkers are kind of spoiled, the younger generation of craft beer drinkers. Nothing wrong with that, but you have to appreciate beers like this as well. I don't always want to get hit over the head with a sledgehammer of hops and malt. And a delicate beer like this that still has so much flavor and balance between the hop and the malt, in my mind, that's a greater testament to the brewer's art, because the bigger beers, you can hide those brewing defects. You can't do that quite so easily in a beer like this. So I'm going to call out the current crowd that has kind of panned this beer. They don't understand this is beer history. They don't think back to the days when there only was the Narragansett and the Schmitz and the occasional Bud that my dad brought home. it's a totally different time, and yeah, maybe I'm dating myself here, but lighten up and enjoy a beer like this, and give a toast to Jack for getting us started down this trail. So I do hope you've tried it. Again, it's about $8 to $9 a six pack, so it's pretty reasonable by today's standards, or about average. Don't know how it's been flying off the shelves. Total Wine still seems to have a little bit in Sherlock's too, but the case supplies seem to be going down. So grab it while you can, in case it's not rolled out again. And I hope that you try it, and when you do, you enjoy it. And if you do, I hope you'll drop me an email, brewguru@brewguru.com. Check out my website, brewguru.com, and drink outside the box.